15 years ago, I gave my sister every dollar I had, my entire savings, because she told me she was in danger. Then she disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, no trace. I rebuilt my life from the ground up, and just when I finally felt safe, she came back, not to apologize, but to accuse me. She claimed I stole her identity, her dreams, her entire life. And somehow the internet believed her. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who once held your trust, stay with me. Because I'm about to show you how I turned a public lie into the sharpest weapon of truth. It was 2:14 a.m. when my phone rang. One of those sounds that makes your chest tighten before you even answer. Stacy's name blinked on the screen. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. I hesitated, thumb hovering, already sensing something was wrong. When I picked up, her voice cracked before she even said hello. "Hey," she whispered. "I'm about to lose everything. The bank's coming tomorrow. I've got nowhere else to go." She was crying, no, sobbing, like a woman who had finally broken. She told me her ex drained her accounts. She was behind on rent. The landlord was threatening eviction. She'd tried everyone, she said. I was her last call. My body moved before my mind did. She was my sister. Despite the distance, despite everything, how could I say no? She used to braid my hair when I was little. She taught me how to lie to Mom when we broke the vase in '98. She held my hand at Dad's funeral. "I just need it for 2 weeks," she said. "I swear." "What would you have done?" I wired her my entire savings that morning. $78,943 every cent I had scraped together to buy my first home. The money I saved by skipping vacations, making coffee at home, and saying no to things that made me feel like I belonged. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't even tell my therapist. I told myself it was temporary. She promised. But the days passed, then weeks, then months, no reply. Calls went unanswered. Texts stayed on delivered. Her Instagram went dark. Mom said she hadn't heard from her either, but there was a strange coldness in her tone, like she was hiding something behind every word. I started to wonder if they were all in on it. At first, I was worried. Maybe she got hurt. Maybe she was ashamed. But when shame becomes silence, and silence becomes absence, you start to hear echoes of your own stupidity. I replayed that call in my head 1,000 times. Her voice, that pause, that damn promise. I tried to track her down, hired a private investigator with what little I had left. He came back with nothing but a first name and a forwarding address that led to a warehouse in Ohio. Stacy had vanished. The anger came slowly, first as shame, then as a rage so quiet it scared me. I stopped talking about her. I buried the memory under work, therapy, and the daily rituals of survival. Wake up, smile, move on. I went back to school, finished my degree. Graduation day came. Everyone else had someone clapping, someone holding flowers. I sat alone in the back row, cap too tight, hands sweating, hoping no one would ask who I came with. No one did. That was the day I promised myself I'd never let anyone that close again. But the universe has a cruel sense of irony. 3 years later, I was sorting boxes at my parents' house, helping them move after retirement, when I found it. A thick, stapled packet stuffed in an old shoebox labeled receipts. It was a legal document, a case file, Stacy's name stamped across the top, with charges for wire fraud and identity theft. Dated 2 years before she called me. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't believe it, but because it confirmed what I already knew and had spent years trying to forget. That she hadn't needed help, she'd needed cover. My mother walked in. Her face went pale when she saw what I was holding. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said quietly. I wanted to scream. Not just for the money, not just for the betrayal, but because they'd all known, and they'd let me walk straight into it with open arms and open accounts. That night, I sat in my car outside their house, headlights off, heart pounding. My phone buzzed with another promotional email from some mortgage company I'd long since unsubscribed from. I deleted it, stared at the empty inbox, then turned the phone off completely. That was the night I realized family doesn't always warn you about the fire. Sometimes they're the ones who hand you the match. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end of my story with Stacy. It was the beginning, because some ghosts don't stay buried, and when they rise again, they bring a storm with them. I hadn't seen her face in years, not in real life, not even in dreams. But there she was, staring at me through my phone screen, smiling like she hadn't stolen everything from me. Her video had been reshared over 2 million times in less than a day. The caption read, "My little sister stole my life. She took my name, my identity, and my business, and now she's thriving off what was mine." I sat frozen, thumb hovering over the pause button, unable to breathe. In the video, Stacy sat in a softly lit room, wearing a neutral tone sweater, speaking in a broken, calculated whisper. Her voice trembled at the right places. She talked about how she'd been mentally manipulated by her younger sister, about how I had cut her off from the world and used her credit to start my own success. She even said I faked her disappearance to cover up my theft. The comments section was a firestorm. How can a sister do that to her own blood? Emma Reynolds needs to be exposed. She's disgusting. I hope Stacy gets justice. They didn't know me, but that didn't matter. The internet had already decided. I refreshed the video page, 3 million views. The algorithm was working fast. Then came the emails, canceled contracts, clients backing out, until further notice. A speaker event I had booked for months sent a formal email cutting ties. I was a liability to their brand. All because of a story with no proof, from a ghost who had reappeared with a script and a tear. The first thing I felt was confusion, then rage, then something worse, humiliation. I had worked for everything I owned. No inheritance, no shortcuts. No one ever handed me anything. Now the world thought I had cheated my way here. What stung more was how convincingly Stacy had twisted the truth. She spoke with just enough detail to sound plausible. She showed vague childhood photos. She talked about our dad's funeral and said I used it to win sympathy while I buried her alive. She even showed pictures of my house, my office, my business logo, and claimed they had all been hers first. I knew it wasn't true, but some part of me started to wonder, what if she believed it? What if deep down she truly thought I owed her? That I had stolen something intangible, opportunity, potential, a life she never built? I opened the old notebook I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. My journal from when I was 25. The pages were dog-eared, tear-stained, chaotic. There were entries about my fear of never being enough. About nights I skipped dinner to save money. About how proud I was to finally have $30,000 in my savings and a vision board that said, "Own my life." I read one entry 3 times over. Stacy called again. I said no this time. I think she hates me now. but I can't keep giving pieces of myself away. I'm finally building something real. I closed the book. My hands were trembling. Then I remembered something else, an old email account I hadn't accessed in years, one I used when I first started freelance work. I logged in. The inbox was empty, but the sent folder wasn't. There it was. A message from Stacy sent to someone named Michael J. The subject line read, "She'll never see it coming." Inside was one line. If I erase every trace of myself online, who's going to prove what's real? It was dated 3 weeks before she disappeared. My mouth went dry. I scrolled further and found a chain of messages between them. Some were flirty, others were calculating. She joked about reinventing herself and blamed me for always getting the light. She called me the accidental favorite and said, "She'll never be ruthless enough to fight back." My heart pounded harder than it had in years. I opened my external hard drive, the one I hadn't touched since college. I dug through folders of old school projects, resumes, and receipts. And then I found it, a recording file named kitchen3am.mp3. I didn't remember saving it, but I clicked play. The audio quality was bad, grainy, static, but her voice cut through clear as glass. She actually wired it all. Can you believe that? Every damn dollar. What an idiot. Then laughter, not joyful, but cruel, ugly. I stared at the screen, letting it loop again, and again. My face burned, not from anger, not from shame, but from something else. Clarity. She wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was trying to erase me. For the first time in my life, I stopped thinking like a sister and started thinking like a strategist. The video, the accusations, the identity theft. They weren't random. They were planned, down to the emotional inflection in Stacy's voice. If I wanted the truth to win, I had to stop playing defense. I needed data, receipts, facts she couldn't twist. So I hired an ethical hacker named Colby, recommended by a security consultant I knew through a women's entrepreneur network. Colby was sharp, young, quiet. He didn't ask for the whole story, just access points. Within 48 hours, he sent me a file labeled Stacy Layer 1. Inside were over a dozen burner accounts traced to the same IP address from 3 different states. Each account had posted comments supporting Stacy's story online, on Reddit threads, YouTube videos, even in the comment sections of my business posts. Some were inflammatory, accusing me of abuse. Others were subtler, sharing experiences from other victims of mine. It was all fake, all fabricated. One post in particular made my stomach churn. It was on a popular mental health blog under the name C.T. Harper. It read, "I used to work with Emma Reynolds. She manipulates people in therapy settings and profits from their pain. She stole her own sister's brand. I was there. I saw it." That was a lie. No one by that name had ever worked with me. "Your sister isn't just smearing you," Colby said in his next call. "She's engineering a digital echo chamber." He showed me how the fake accounts interacted with each other, validating each other's lies to build perceived credibility. She'd created a loop of false witnesses, so convincing that even I would have doubted myself if I hadn't known the truth. "She's playing a long game," he said, "and she's playing it well." I felt sick. But beneath the nausea came something else, clarity. The moment I stopped seeing her as family and started seeing her as a tactical opponent, the path forward became sharper. Still, I wasn't made of armor. I was exhausted. So I drove to visit an old friend, Lena, from college. We hadn't spoken properly in years, life, work, distance. But when I called, she just said, "Come over, no questions." She greeted me with takeout and cheap wine, the kind we used to share when we were broke students cramming for exams. We sat on her balcony, legs tucked under blankets, the city buzzing far below us. I told her everything. For hours I spoke without filtering, without editing for empathy. I expected her to judge me, but she didn't. She just listened, then said something simple. "She's trying to erase you, but she doesn't know who you've become." It was the first time I felt like someone saw me, beyond the scandal, beyond the viral smear. When I got home, there was an encrypted email waiting. From Colby. Attached was a video file. The subject line read, "Practicing for the camera." The clip showed Stacy in front of a mirror, rehearsing. Her hair was tied back, her face bare. She repeated phrases like, "I felt so abandoned," and "she took everything," over and over, adjusting her tone, blinking on cue. She practiced trembling her voice, then staring down the lens. I watched it twice, then again. I wasn't looking at my sister anymore. I was watching a performance, and I was done being her audience. I made 3 phone calls the next morning, first to a lawyer, then to a crisis communications expert, and finally to a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery and reputational harm. Each one joined what I started calling my truth team. No emotion, no drama, just strategy. The lawyer started pulling financial records. The comms expert created a file of every false post, preparing a timeline for eventual exposure. The therapist helped me shape my story, not to win public favor, but to reclaim my own narrative. We found more. Stacy had used a different name, Evelyn M. Foster, to take out a line of credit 10 years ago. The application included my childhood address, a social security number 1 digit off mine, and a forged signature. It was buried under a mountain of identity theft cases that never saw daylight. But it was there. She had been building this web for over a decade. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Every injustice she planted would be a receipt. Every lie, a trap she walked into herself. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to rant online. That's what she wanted. No, I had something else planned, because if truth is a weapon, timing is everything. And my story wouldn't go viral through a tweet. It would drop in the middle of her biggest stage. Stacy had been booked on The Real Recovery, a wildly popular podcast with millions of subscribers, especially among women seeking healing stories. The timing was perfect. She had gained traction online as the sister who lost everything. And now she was about to tell her story to the world, unchallenged, uninterrupted, or so she thought. I found out about the interview through a fan of the show who had been following both our stories. They messaged me late one night with a screenshot of the announcement, "Coming this Friday, the woman who was erased." I didn't sleep. The next morning I compiled everything. The audio of Stacy mocking me, the email to her boyfriend about deleting her digital trail, and the clip of her rehearsing lies in front of a mirror. I didn't add a name. I didn't explain. I just attached it to an encrypted message and sent it to the podcast host. The subject line read, "If you believe in truth, listen before you record." I expected nothing. But during the live broadcast, something changed. Stacy was 10 minutes into her story, repeating the same narrative, tears balanced perfectly in her eyes, when the host raised a hand gently. "Before we go further," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "we received an anonymous submission just before filming. It's relevant. I think it's only fair we play it." Stacy blinked. "Excuse me?" The host didn't answer. She turned to the control booth. The room went quiet. Then came Stacy's voice, flat, confident, cruel. "She actually wired it all. Can you believe that? Every damn dollar. What an idiot." Then her laughter. It echoed through the studio. The host didn't speak. Neither did Stacy. The audience watching live started commenting immediately. Streams of "what" and "oh my god" filled the chat. Someone clipped the moment and uploaded it within minutes. Stacy's face paled. She stuttered something about being taken out of context, but it was too late. The internet doesn't pause for context, it feeds on impact. The show ended early. The host issued a follow-up tweet that evening. Sometimes truth arrives quietly, and sometimes it plays at full volume. We will not be airing this episode further. By morning, Dark Stacy the Scammer was trending worldwide. Users began stitching the original TikTok with the audio clip, side-by-sides, reaction videos, analysis, even parody remakes. But something even more important began to happen. People started asking questions. They traced her social media history, found inconsistencies in her timelines, screenshotted contradictions from old posts. Someone even found an archived website where she sold coaching sessions under a different name, Evelyn M. Foster. And then, the biggest blow came from someone I didn't expect. A man named Carlos Vega posted a thread on X. He was calm, factual. He said he had dated Stacy 8 years ago. She had introduced herself as a wellness entrepreneur recovering from trauma. She convinced him to invest $30,000 into a healing retreat center that never existed. She vanished 6 months later. He never spoke publicly until now. "I didn't want to come forward," he wrote. "But she hurt me too, and if she's hurting others, it's time." The dominoes fell fast. Blogs and forums unearthed more fake profiles tied to Stacy. A YouTuber did a full exposé video, 20 minutes long, complete with visuals, emails, and voice analysis. But I wasn't celebrating. That weekend, I drove out to the coast, alone. I sat on the sand, facing the horizon, the wind pulling at my hair, and cried. Not because I felt victorious, but because, for the first time in 15 years, I felt believed. It wasn't a grand vindication. It was quiet, gentle, like a knot inside me had finally loosened. The world had shifted slightly back toward balance. When I got back to my apartment that Sunday, there was an email waiting. It was from a senior editor at a major publishing house. "I saw everything," it began. "Your silence was your greatest power. If you're ready to tell the full story on your terms, I think the world is ready to listen." I stared at the screen. For years, I was invisible, voiceless, powerless, and now the story that almost destroyed me was mine to tell. The lawsuits moved quickly. Once the podcast fallout hit mainstream media, Stacy's facade crumbled. My legal team filed 3 formal actions: defamation, identity fraud, and financial deception. With the paper trail we had, emails, recordings, forged documents, it wasn't a question of if we'd win, only how fast. I didn't have to appear in court. I didn't speak publicly. I didn't draft statements or hold press conferences. My lawyer, Elaine, handled it all with surgical precision. She reminded me more of a chess master than an attorney, always 3 steps ahead, always calm. Meanwhile, Stacy went silent. Her socials were deactivated. Her healing podcast sponsors dropped her. I heard whispers she was negotiating a quiet settlement. I felt no satisfaction, just relief. Every day that passed without a new attack was a day I could breathe again. I slept through the night, ate real meals, laughed with Lena over coffee. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't living in reaction mode. I was rebuilding. Then came the blow I didn't expect. My parents released a joint statement, not to condemn Stacy, but to defend her. They called her a misunderstood soul, said she had always struggled with mental health, and implied that I was capitalizing on family pain for personal gain. I reread the statement 3 times. Not once did they mention the money. Not once did they mention the lies. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I printed out the photo that had once sat on my parents' mantle, me and Stacy, both in white dresses at some family event, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. I held it for a moment, fingers brushing the edge. Then I tore it down the middle, and then again, and again, until it was nothing but fragments. I didn't just lose a sister. I lost a mother, a father, a version of myself that kept begging them to choose me. That night, I sat at my desk, pulled out a sheet of thick stationery, and wrote a letter. Not to Stacy, not to them, to me, to the girl I had been at 25, the one who had wired her savings, hoping love would be enough. "You're not stupid," I wrote. "You're kind. You believe in people. That's your power, not your flaw. One day, you'll stop needing their permission to heal." I folded it neatly and placed it in a box of old journals. I didn't need to send it. I just needed her to hear it, from the woman she became. Word spread that I was the sister who didn't fight back with fire. But that wasn't true. I fought with truth, with stillness, with patience, and with action. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a national mental health conference. Then another, then a third. I didn't lead with scandal. I led with resilience. I talked about gaslighting within families, the quiet manipulations no one sees, the shame that silences survivors more than abuse ever could. I launched an online course called Boundary Bloom, designed to help women untangle emotional conditioning from toxic ties. Within a year, it had over 40,000 members. I still didn't talk about Stacy directly. That wasn't the story I wanted to live in anymore. Then, one morning, I opened my inbox to a single sentence from a name I didn't recognize. "You're the reason I didn't kill myself last year." She was 15. Her sister had isolated her, lied about her to their parents, made her feel like a monster. She said my story gave her proof that she wasn't alone, that her pain had a name. I sat with her words for a long time. Not crying, not shaking, just full. That afternoon, I deactivated my Twitter, logged off Instagram, deleted the business page. Not because I was afraid, because I had nothing left to prove. That evening, I poured tea, sat by the window, and opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it, Chapter 12, The Ending They Never Saw Coming. The house by the river didn't look like much from the outside. Pale gray siding, chipped shutters, a small porch with room for only one chair. But it was mine. No noise, no headlines, no phones buzzing with alerts, just the wind skimming across the water and the distant sound of gulls slicing through the morning. I woke early, not out of anxiety but habit. I moved through sunlit routines, yoga at dawn, coffee brewed slowly, hands wrapped around the warmth of the mug as I watched the light shift across the floor. I cooked without music playing, letting the rhythm of chopping vegetables be enough. I stopped filling silence like it was something to be ashamed of. It was strange at first to not be fighting, strange to not be anticipating the next lie, the next headline, the next betrayal from someone who once shared my childhood bed. But strange became sacred. I wrote every morning. Not the book I promised the publisher, not the one about survival or scandal. Something gentler, something for myself. I didn't even give it a title, just scenes, memories, fragments of thought. There were no deadlines anymore, no one else's expectations to fulfill. One afternoon, it rained for hours, thick, persistent sheets that tapped against the windows like they were reminding me to pause. I stood by the glass, fingers curled loosely around a cup of green tea, and let it all soak in. The quiet, the peace, the stillness that didn't ask me to perform. And for the first time in 15 years, I smiled, not for anyone watching, just because I could. Then a soft ding from the laptop on my desk. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. There it was, an email, no subject line, no sender name, just a single word in the inbox preview. Sorry. I stared at it, unmoving, from Stacy. No attachments, no threats, just a message waiting to be opened, or not. My fingers hovered, but I didn't click, not because I was afraid of what it said, because I finally realized I didn't need it. Her apology wouldn't return my years. It wouldn't rewrite the nights I doubted my own memory, or give me back the relationships she'd severed. And I wasn't looking for a final confrontation or a redemptive arc. I had something better, a blank page, so I closed the email, opened a new document, typed a title in bold letters at the top. Book 2, Helping Others Reclaim Their Stories. I smiled again, this time with purpose, because the story I wanted to write now wasn't about her. It was about healing, about the quiet work that happens after the storm, the part that never goes viral, the hours spent rebuilding trust, drawing new boundaries, learning that survival isn't the end game, thriving is. The book would include tools, stories from others, letters from people who'd reached out in the aftermath of the podcast disaster. And it would also be about the gray areas, about the guilt that lingers even after justice is served, about how you can love someone and still walk away forever. I had already written the opening line in my head days ago. This isn't a story about what was taken from me. It's a story about what I built when no one was looking. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Lena stood there, her hair windblown, cheeks flushed from the cold. She held a folder in one hand, in the other a bottle of wine. "I figured you could use a break," she said. I laughed and stepped aside to let her in. Over dinner, she told me about the coaching program we had co-created, the one she'd quietly expanded while I retreated into solitude. We were reaching over 60 countries now. She wanted to launch a podcast of our own, something slow, real, a space for survivors to speak without spectacle. Then she paused. "There's something else I need to say," she added, suddenly shy. I looked up. "I've loved you for a long time," she said, "and I never said anything because you were in survival mode, and I knew I needed to wait for the day you chose peace. Not for me, for you." For a moment, I said nothing, not because I didn't know how I felt, but because I realized she had always been there, not just in the loud chapters, but in the quiet margins. And that mattered more than any grand declaration ever could. I reached across the table, took her hand. "Let's build something honest," I said, She smiled. Weeks passed. The second book took shape. Speaking invitations rolled in. But I said no to most. I didn't need stages anymore. I just needed truth and a few good people to share it with. I no longer lived waiting for the next attack. I lived for sunrises, for stories, for stillness, for the parts of life that no one claps for, but that matter most. She didn't win by destroying her sister. She won by choosing herself.